Good afternoon, everyone, and it's still wonderful to be here. It's my first time at ISPA, and I think all the panellists, it's also their first time, but they were already, having met a couple of times, they're firm friends forever, I think. So, well, my hardest job is to stop them speaking, so let's see. When I was thinking about how to introduce this session, I kept coming back to the title, The Urgency of Now. And I think this session about access, inclusion and equity is about changing the world. I don't want to sound like an evangelist. Most of us working in the arts didn't set out to do that, but many of us think it's the only thing we can do at the moment, and after all, someone's got to. So here are three people, artists, activists, who do that every day. Renata Carvalho and Luis Correia, who is going to translate for Renata from Brazil, Kevin Loring from Canada, Marlene Roux from South Africa. And it's a privilege, and as I said, maybe unenviable task to try and moderate these amazing speakers in an hour, which won't be easy. I'm not going to read their biogs, they're all in your ISPA material, but I will ask them briefly to introduce themselves. Here is diversity, slightly let down by this older middle-class white woman, the moderator, it has to be said. But picking up on what Moshin said yesterday about often being the fringe weird guy at a panel for diversity purposes, if we're moving towards middle-aged white people being the weird guy, then that has to be a very good thing. My company in London, Artsadmin, produces lots of projects that try and bring about change. For example, work that inspires action on the most serious issues of our time, which is climate change. We also commission work with disabled artists through the Unlimited scheme, which is where I met Marlene at the Unlimited Symposium last September. I'm a firm believer in the power of the arts to change the world. I know the panel believes this too, and I'm sure everybody in this room does. But the problem is the world does seem to be getting more grim by the day. I don't think it's an exaggeration to talk about a rise in fascism. In my rather long lifetime now, things have never seemed so threatening. I think we all sometimes have doubts about what we're actually achieving. Are we sticking on Band-Aid, trying to repair the damage caused by our respective governments? Are we really being inclusive? Are we reflecting the diversity of our society in our programming, in our audiences? Are we achieving anything at all? It's hard to prove it. The arts do bring about change, but we always seem to be playing catch-up. The world, to me, seems to be getting worse at this angle, and the good work we're all doing is sort of going at this angle. So we do need to speed it up. It is urgent, the urgency of now. No doubt each and every one of us has been to talks and panels about access, diversity, inclusion for many years. We are making some progress. These issues wouldn't have probably been discussed 10 years ago. We're well-intentioned and good at talking the talk, but perhaps not so good at walking the walk. There was a recent report in the UK about class, a particularly British problem, of course, which concluded that those surveys showed that those working in the creative industries and the arts had the most liberal and tolerant views. In fact, we were well behind other industries when it came to employment in terms of diversity and class. We still tend to employ people like us, and that affects everything we program and produce, and of course that affects the people who see the work. Change won't come about that way. We can't change the world if we don't change ourselves. So with the panel's help and yours, let's leave the room today with some real action. Let's try and make this is not just a well-intentioned conversation. Let's come up with some plans, something each and every one of us can do separately or together and soon. So I'm going to ask the panel to tell us, first of all, how they would like to be identified, and then perhaps tell us something that isn't on their biography. Each will give a short presentation first about what they do and why they do it. And then we'll have a little gap in the conversation between us. And then we'll all look into the future and talk about our hopes and our challenges. There is, of course, time for questions from the floor. There are 2 mics, I think, at the front of the stage here. And we hope that they're not just questions, but ideas for positive action can come forward from all of you. So I'm asking Renata to start, again coming back to the urgency with the recent election of Bolsonaro in Brazil. I'm not sure where to start on that conversation, Renata, but I'm sure you'll have plenty to say about it. Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon a todos. Primeiro, me desculpar por não falar inglês, o que acaba dificultando pouco nossa comunicação.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I apologize for not speaking English, which makes our communication a little bit more difficult.
Dizer que é um prazer estar dividindo a mesa com Marlene, Kevin, Judith e Luiz.
But it's a major pleasure to be sharing the panel with Marlene, Judith, Kevin, and Luis.
Meu nome é Renata Carvalho, tenho 38 anos, sou brasileira e travesti.
My name is Renata Carvalho. I am 38 years old. I'm Brazilian and a travesti.
Travesti é uma identidade latino-americana, tipicamente brasileira e majoritariamente ligada à pobreza.
Travesti is a typically Latin American identity. It's typically Brazilian as well and majorly connected to poverty.
Pertencemos ao gênero feminino, nos entendemos e nos expressamos através deste fenótipo e é através dele que queremos ser tratada.
We belong to the feminine gender. We understand ourselves and express ourselves through this phenotype. And it's through this archetype that we want to be treated and addressed.
Porém, não somos mulheres e muito menos homens.
But we are not women and much less men.
Somos travesti. Digo isso porque o gênero na linguagem para uma travesti é muito importante.
We are travesti. And I say that because the gender in language for a travesti is hugely important.
No meu país, passamos muitas vezes pelo desconforto de insistir em nos tratar no masculino.
Back in my country, we go through the discomfort of being addressed as man or masculine. We are she.
Somos she. Começo lembrando com enorme alegria e felicidade que em um evento de arte, neste caso estou falando da ISPA 2019,
I start also reminding ourselves the great joy and the happiness that in a major arts event, and I'm talking about ISPA 2019,
eu não ter sido a primeira pessoa trans a falar em um painel.
I was not the first transgender person to be in a panel.
Na grande maioria, eu fui a primeira.
The majority of these events, I'm the first transgender person to speak.
T. Uglow conseguiu isso ontem aqui. Parabéns, T.
T. Uglow was the first one yesterday at the theater, and congratulations, T.
Mas posso dizer que fui a primeira travesti a falar no painel da ISPA.
But I can claim to be the first travesti as a speaker.
Yes!
The first.
The first one.
Isto não é uma comemoração,
This is not a celebration.
é um apontamento.
It's a fact.
Isto é uma transfobia.
This is transphobic.
Espero que não pare em nós e que essa porta agora nunca mais se feche a corpos como o meu.
I wish this will not stop in me, and this door is kept open for other people like me.
Neste ano, completo 23 anos de carreira como atriz e diretora de teatro.
This year, I will be completing 23 years in my career as an actress and director.
E desde quando eu comecei no teatro em 1996, os artistas cisgêneros tentam me expulsar dele.
And since I started my work back in 1996, the cisgender artists try to shut me out.
A arte cisgênera é transfóbica.
Cisgender arts are transphobic.
E não porque ela não permite que existimos.
And it's not because it doesn't allow us to exist.
Nós estamos lá nos textos e roteiros
We are there. We are in the text, we are in the scripts,
de teatros,
at theater,
novelas,
soap operas,
filmes
film and
e
series.
séries. Mas porque ela não permite que corpos como o meu estejam em cena.
But it doesn't allow bodies like mine to be on stage.
O teatro é o local mais democrático que eu conheço. Pena que os artistas cisgêneros não saibam disso.
Theater is the most democratic space that I know of, and it's a pity that cisgender artists don't know about that.
Todos sabem o que é cisgênero?
Does everyone here know what cisgender means?
Se você não sabe o que é, provavelmente você é.
If you don't know what this means, you probably are one.
Yeah.
Preciso também trazer alguns dados do meu país para poder elucidar algumas questões.
I need to share some data from my country to shed some light on a few issues.
O Brasil é o país que mais mata travestis, mulheres e homens trans no mundo.
Brazil is the highest ranking country in killing or murdering of travestis, women and trans men.
O segundo lugar, o México, mata 4 vezes menos.
Second position is Mexico, and it kills 4 times less.
As mortes são geralmente hiperbolizadas.
Deaths and murders are usually very dramatic and intense.
Muitos tiros,
Lots of gunshots,
facadas,
stabbing,
objetos enfiados no ânus.
impaling,
O local mais atacado é o rosto.
and the body part usually more attacked is the face.
Há muitos casos de esquartejamento, principalmente do órgão genital.
There is lots of cases of mutilation, especially the genitals.
Estamos na liderança há anos.
And we are global leaders for years.
Só em 2018 foram 162 pessoas trans assassinadas só porque eram trans.
Only last year, it was about 162 transgender people were assassinated just because being who they are.
Muitas de nós migraram para a Europa porque lá a polícia não mata travesti na rua.
Many of us are fleeing to Europe because there police doesn't kill travestis in the streets.
Só que 80% desses assassinatos são de travestis e mulheres trans negras.
And about 80% of these murders are of black trans women and black travestis.
Talvez seja este o motivo de eu ainda estar viva e podendo falar aqui.
And this may be the reason I'm still alive and I'm able to address you here.
Porque no Brasil eu sou branca e com isso eu vivo o privilégio da branquitude.
Because back in Brazil, she is white, and because of that, she lives in a white privilege.
A segunda causa de morte é o suicídio.
Second reason for death reasons in Brazil among travestis is suicide.
Agora falamos que não nos suicidamos, somos suicidados.
They don't say, they say no longer that they suicide, they are suicides. They commit suicide against them.
A vida média de uma pessoa trans no Brasil é de 27 anos, o resto da população é de 75.
Average life expectancy for travestis in Brazil is 27 years old, whereas the general population is 75.
90% das travestis estão na prostituição compulsória.
90% of travestis are in prostitution, mandatory prostitution.
E 90% somos expulsas de casa entre 12 a 14 anos de idade.
And 90% of us are expelled from home between 12 and 14 years old.
Eu me prostituí. Eu fui expulsa de casa.
I have been a prostitute and I've been kicked out from home.
A cada 48 horas, uma pessoa trans é assassinada e a cada 19 horas, uma pessoa LGBTQI+.
Every 48 hours in Brazil, a trans person is assassinated. And every 19 hours in Brazil, a LGBTQI+ person is murdered.
Somos um dos países mais perigosos do mundo para ser mulher.
We are among the most dangerous countries in the world to be a woman in.
Uma mulher é estuprada a cada 11 minutos.
A woman is raped every 11 minutes.
Ao final deste painel, 7 mulheres terão sido estupradas no meu país.
By the end of this panel, 7 women will have been raped back in Brazil.
Está em curso no Brasil agora um genocídio da população negra e indígena.
In Brazil is taking place. What's taking place in Brazil now is a genocide of the black population and indigenous population.
Há mais mortes de negros por ano no Brasil do que países que estão em guerra.
More black people die in Brazil every year than in countries who are at war.
Por isso, Bolsonaro foi eleito presidente no Brasil.
This explains why Bolsonaro was elected president in Brazil.
Nosso massacre é um projeto de governo e de sociedade.
Our slaughter is a project of government and a social project.
Agora sim, diante desse quadro, posso continuar minha fala.
Now I can actually start to expose my thought.
Em 2002, não aparecendo mais convites para atuar na época como ator,
Back in 2002, because I had no opportunities to perform as an actor because of my femininity,
Torno-me diretor de teatro.
I became a theater director.
Passo 10 anos na direção.
I spent 10 years in that position.
Meu percebimento como um corpo travesti acontece na direção e é nela onde faço a minha transição.
My self-awareness as a travesti happens when I am a director. So my transition happens from within that position.
Em 2007, me torno agente de prevenção voluntária de ISTs, hepatites e tuberculose na minha cidade natal, em Santos.
In 2007, I became an agent for voluntary prevention of ISTs, hepatitis and tuberculosis, back in my hometown, Santos.
Trabalhando exclusivamente com travestis e mulheres trans na prostituição.
Working exclusively with travestis and women in prostitution.
Convivendo com minhas pares, me torno ativista e militante, principalmente da causa trans.
By getting closer with my peers, I become an activist and a militant, especially in the trans cause.
Em 2012, finalmente retorno aos palcos, e desta vez agora como atriz, num solo chamado Dentro de Mim Mora Outra, onde contava minha vida e travestilidade.
In 2012, I finally go back to the stages, this time as an actress, in a solo show called Inside Myself Lives Another One, that used to tell about her transsexuality.
E é com este trabalho que junto minha identidade e o meu maior amor, o teatro.
It is through this work that I can combine my identity and my greatest love, theater.
Então, depois de um tempo, fui me sentindo narcisista. Resolvi contar outras histórias de pessoas trans.
And after a while, I was starting to become a bit narcissistic, and then I decided to tell other people's stories.
O meu ofício me mostra que quando preciso montar Shakespeare, eu devo estudar a peça escolhida, a vida e a obra para compreender melhor o que esse artista pensava.
My occupation shows me that whenever I need to stage Shakespeare, I need to study the play of choice, but also the life and work of the author to better understand what this artist was trying to communicate.
Então fui atrás da minha história, fui atrás da minha ancestralidade. E para contá-la, primeiro eu precisava conhecê-la.
Then I went after my own history, my own story, my own ancestrality, and to tell it, I needed first to get to know it better.
Não existem livros que contam as nossas histórias. Os livros que existem é contando exatamente a exclusão histórica desses corpos.
There are no books telling our story, and the few existing books are actually telling the story of exclusion.
Então eu resolvi escrever esse livro e contar a nossa história.
Then I decided to write that book and tell that story.
Comecei a ir atrás de livros que falassem sobre pessoas trans. Este compêndio, com mais de 100 livros, chamo de Travesteca.
I went after books who addressed and told stories of trans persons. And this compendium of more than 100 books, I now call the Travesteca.
Me descubro transpóloga e passo a chamar esse estudo de transpologia.
I find myself as a transtropologist, and I call this study a transtropology. Sorry.
Ou seja, uma pessoa trans que estuda a corporeidade trans com foco nas artes.
Meaning a trans person who studies the transgender body identity with the focus in the arts.
Atualmente interpreto no teatro Jesus de Nazaré, num texto da escocesa trans Jo Clifford chamado O Evangelho segundo Jesus, Rainha do Céu.
I presently am performing and playing the role of Jesus of Nazareth in a text by the transgender Scottish writer Jo Clifford called The Gospels According to Jesus, Queen of Heaven.
Onde venho sofrendo ataques, violações, ameaças de espancamentos e morte.
And because of that work, I've been suffering attacks, aggressions, violations, threats of death and violence.
O espetáculo foi censurado pela 5ª vez no Brasil, a última agora em janeiro, em Recife.
The show has been censored for 5 times in Brazil. The latest one just happening now in January 2019 in Recife.
A censura é proibida no meu país desde a redemocratização após uma ditadura militar que durou 21 anos.
Censorship is illegal in my country since the redemocratization of Brazil after the dictatorship that lasted for 21 years.
O espetáculo faz a seguinte pergunta: E se Jesus voltasse nos dias de hoje como uma travesti?
The play poses the following question: what would happen if Jesus came back to earth as in the body of a travesti?
Jesus é a imagem e semelhança de todos, menos de nós, pessoas trans.
Jesus is our image and likeness for everyone, except the travesti body.
Nosso corpo é inapropriado, sexualizado, fetichizado, público e de segunda categoria.
Our body is inappropriate, is sexualized, is fetishized, it's public, and it's second-rate body.
Com dificuldade de encontrar espaço e trabalho a corpos como o meu, devido ao que chamo de transfake, artistas cisgêneros que interpretam personagens trans.
There is a huge difficulty in finding space and work for bodies like mine, due to what I call trans fake, which are cisgender artists who play the role of trans people.
Fundo no Brasil em 2017 o Coletivo T, primeiro coletivo artístico formado integralmente por artistas trans.
Back in 2017, I founded in Brazil the Coletivo T. It was the first artistic collective formed exclusively for trans artists.
Fundo Monarte, Movimento Nacional de Artistas Trans.
I also founded Monarte, which is the national movement for trans artists.
E com ele crio o Manifesto Representatividade Trans, que visa que artistas trans interpretem personagens trans.
And through this movement, I created the Trans Representativeness Manifesto, which aims to give trans artists the chance to interpret trans characters.
A representatividade trans é o ato desses corpos estarem presentes nos espaços de poder, e a arte é um espaço de poder.
Trans representativeness is the act through which these bodies will be present in spaces of power, and the arts are one of these spaces.
E ela foi e é usada para a exclusão. Foi assim com as mulheres e depois com os negros.
But the arts have been created and are used for exclusion as well, especially for women and black people.
Agora é a vez dos corpos dissidentes ocuparem esses espaços.
And now it's time for the dissident bodies to occupy these places.
A representatividade faz com que os artistas cisgêneros convivam com os corpos trans.
Representativeness makes cisgender artists to live side by side with trans bodies.
Pois é no convívio
Because it's by living side by side,
e só com ele que podemos quebrar estigmas,
and only through it we can break paradigms,
lendas,
legends,
folclorizações,
folklorizations,
a construção social
social constructs,
e a criminalização dos nossos corpos, identidades e vivências.
and the criminalization of our bodies, identities, and experiences.
Nós, artistas trans, queremos fazer um grande acordo internacional.
We, the trans artists, aim to make a great international agreement.
Pedimos que nos próximos 30 anos artistas cisgêneros deixem de representar personagens trans.
We ask that for the next 30 years, the cisgender artists let go of playing transgender characters.
E que incluam artistas trans em seus congressos, fóruns, coletivos artísticos, grupos, companhias, instituições, peças, filmes e novelas.
And include trans artists in their congresses, forums, collectives, groups, companies, institutions, plays, films, and soap operas.
E tenho certeza que estatísticas como as que eu apresentei aqui hoje ficarão apenas na memória e história, para que lembremos sempre, assim não corremos o risco de retornar a ela.
And I'm sure that statistics such as the ones I presented here today will only be part of our memories and history, so we can always remember that we are not at risk of coming back in time and going backwards.
Nós precisamos fazer isso agora, cada um de nós que está aqui hoje nesta sala.
We need to do this now, and every one of us in this room needs to do that.
Precisamos humanizar,
We need to humanize,
naturalizar
naturalize,
e acalmar os olhos cisgêneros com a nossa presença.
and soothe the cisgender eyes through our presence.
Ainda estamos lutando para sermos consideradas humanas.
We are still struggling to be seen as human beings.
No final, queremos reproduzir aquela velha e clichê frase:
At the end, we want to reproduce that old cliché.
Que a arte imite a vida e a vida imite a arte.
Let art imitate life and let life imitate art.
Que a arte inclua os corpos trans para que a sociedade passe a incluí-los também.
Let art include the trans bodies, so society can include the trans body as well.
Precisamos alargar esse conceito de humanidade que não nos contempla.
We need to enlarge the concept of humanity, which so far is not including us.
Queremos parar de morrer.
We want to stop dying.
Obrigada, Daniel Valeriano. Obrigada, Luiz Coradazzi, pela indicação ao meu nome para estar aqui hoje diante de vocês.
Thank you, Daniel Valeriano and Luis Corradazzi, for indicating my name so I can be with you here today.
Pois quem valida a arte, não valida a arte feita por corpos como o meu.
Because usually who validates art does not validate bodies like mine in the arts.
Hoje, a ISPA valida o meu corpo e a minha voz travesti para o mundo.
Today, ISPA validates my body and my voice to the world.
Obrigada, ISPA.
Thank you, ISPA. Evoe.
Thank you, Renata. It's hard to know how to follow that. We had an informal conversation yesterday about it wasn't going to be a competition between which country had the hardest time for their artists, but it's hard to know quite how we top that, or bottom it, I should say, really, in terms of Brazil. But we're going to move to a country that most of the world seems to want to move to now, close to half of America and certainly most of Europe, I think, which is Canada. So you're going to tell us it's not as marvellous as we think it is, but from the outside it looks better than you. So over to you, Kevin. Thank you.
En jarig sin wenwen, Kevin Loring han squashed, met temich, in Tlekapmuch, Tlekum Chin, Mechampton. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kevin Loring. I'm in Tlekapmuch from British Columbia, which is an interior Salish nation. In south central British Columbia, and our territory also extends into northern Washington state. Before I go further, I just want to acknowledge that we are here gathered on Mannahatta, the traditional lands of the Lenape people, and I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to bring my ancestors with me here and to share this time and space here in Lenape lands with all of you. I am the artistic director of the newly created Indigenous Theatre Department at the National Arts Centre of Canada. I'm also the artistic director. Oh, hey! Yep.
Oh, Canada.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm also the artistic director of Savage Society, or Savage Production Society, still based in British Columbia. My work, my body of work, has always been both 1 foot in community, 1 foot on our stages. And I'm going to carry that forward in my tenure at the National Arts Centre as well. This new department has an enormous task ahead of us. We have an enormous country with over 685 different First Nations, different cultures, different peoples that we are tasked to represent, which is impossible. But what we can do is we can support those Indigenous artists from the Arctic, the Inuk, the Inuit artists, to the Mi'kmaq on the East Coast, to the Haida and to my peoples on the West Coast, and the folks in the Plains and the Métis. It's a vast, vast, disparate set of peoples in Canada. Often we think of Indigenous, do you speak Indian, or do you speak Native? You know, there are 36 distinct languages in British Columbia alone. 36. And most of them, if not all of them, are perishing. They're dying. My language, the Tlekapmuch language, I think there are less than 300 speakers alive today who are fluent. There are steps being made. This year is the year of the United Nations Year of the Indigenous Languages, which is, I hope, across the world will spur nations to invest in the preservation of those languages, the rebirth of and the reuse of those languages, and for the people where they come from. For me, my mother is a language teacher, but she thinks in English. She thinks in English and has to translate English thoughts into Capuchin words. And we hope that we can reverse that we can begin to again think in our language. Because our language is our science, it's our arts, it is our culture. And often we take it for granted, but when you are a member of a dying language, you feel very much the loss. You feel very much the ache to have that. Through my work with Savage Society, we've been involved in a community project where we are resurrecting our creation stories by using language, by revisiting these 100-year-old wax cylinder recordings of our people singing, telling stories in the language. We use that material as source material to create new songs and to give breath back into our words, into our thoughts, into our language, into our stories. My hope is at the National Arts Center that I can extend that model of working with community and bringing those community-based processes to a national stage, to a national venue, and to take it around the country and around the world. For me, at the National Arts Center, it is meaningless. It is absolutely meaningless for there to be an Indigenous theater department there if we are not a safe space for Indigenous people, who are the most impoverished people in our nation, in Canada. For my role there, my role is very much about opening up that space and allowing for that community to be held there, to be welcomed there, on their own territory, in their own traditional lands. But also, I feel that because of this dispersion of Indigenous people across Canada, which is an enormous, enormous country, and the great differences between the different nations, our role is also to go to them. That even though we are a center, we are a building with venues, and it's an elite space for an elite artist and an elite audience class. My role at the NAC, the vision that I have for the department that I am in charge of, will be to take our work out to the communities, out to the remote communities. There are many places in Canada that you can only reach by plane. You can only fly in by bush plane. And that's very difficult. But that's where our people are at. And that audience, those people, are who we as a department need to reach. And this is the first time in our country, and perhaps the world, where an Indigenous theater department has the resources to make something like that happen. It's the first time where we have the capacity to be able to move work from our own agency, from an Indigenous-led department, an Indigenous-led organization. Well, not the entire NAC, but one day. An Indigenous-led department with the capacity to be able to pick up a work from British Columbia and bring it to Ottawa and then help, with partners, take it around the world, take it across the country, take it to the United States. My hope is that this new department will be a hub, a global hub for Indigenous work from around the world, as well as, of course, our servicing the artists of our own nation in Canada. But I believe that in the position that we are as a national venue, a national institution within Canada, that we will have the capacity to be able to lift work from Australia and bring it to Canada. And vice versa, we can send work to Australia and then to New Zealand and then off to Asia and then across Europe. Because now we will have the capacity to make these things happen and to link with all of you and to make these partnerships work. So hopefully we'll find some friends out there. I don't want to take up too much time because I want to get into a conversation with these amazing, amazing human beings. But I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be sitting on this panel with these beautiful, beautiful human beings and to share a little bit of what I'm doing and what we're all doing with you. Homat Kukstram.
Thank you, Kevin. So now I'll move on to Marlene, and actually the connection there about a global hub. I was thinking of your space that transformed from a white apartheid, whites-only space in, I think, was it 1971, to what you've created there today. So that's another story of transformation.
I think it's a team effort, it's a nation effort, it's not an individual effort. But first of all, I want to acknowledge our lives is about acknowledging other people, because where we are today is what other people have contributed to who you are. Mm-hmm. And first of all, I would like to acknowledge Linda Bucasini, if she's here, a colleague of mine. And I would also like to acknowledge two wonderful young men that is fellows here today. One is from Zambia and one is from Uganda. Is Abdul here? Yeah, there's Abdul and there's Gift and Shamaine, my colleague, is here. And all the organizers, I think it's very important. But the most important persons for me at this particular stage, besides Judith, Kevin, Renata, Louise, which is important for me because you now become part of my DNA, is the persons with disability here today. I would like to say, in future, I'm talking about in future, that we need to have sign language interpreters. Because if we talk about inclusivity, it should be that inclusivity with everybody. Because it's about love, it's about inclusion. So today I'm going to talk a little bit hard, because you theatre directors, what is the relevancy of a theatre? What's the relevancy of arts if we're only programming for ourselves and to feel good? The experience that I have, you said we must talk a little bit of ourselves. I'm a miracle baby. A miracle because I've survived apartheid and I'm on a journey of healing. Because we're a young democracy. We have 11 languages. With sign language, it is 12. We come from extremely, apartheid was terrible because it worked. Because it's a mindset. And how you stereotype people. And how you have marginalized people because of the basis of the color of your skin. And these things don't go away overnight. Because I'm a proud woman with a disability and I'm 52 years old. So I was born in racism. So every single day, I must confront my demons. Being disabled in an apartheid era, I can first of all taste, smell apartheid. Because I've experienced it. Until you don't experience being marginalized, voiceless, have no right to vote, has no right or access to buildings, you can never program me. And that is a very important message. Because you cannot program the nuances, what I have been through. So I take from that into the theatre space. I'm actually a fluke. What is a fluke now in English? It is I must pinch myself all the time. Hey, am I real? Because I could have never imagined that this space that I'm now working in, and I'm very grateful to be able to do that, is the space that was built in 1971 only for white people. We couldn't enter it. And if you enter it, you will be arrested. How do you transform, or how do you start a journey with a nation where there's a street, where you are categorized black in this street, in this particular township? Across the road is persons of color, of mixed race, as you call it in America, or wherever in the world, is on this side, and the privilege on that side. We couldn't move. Just to give you just a glimpse. We were so conditioned that we won't move even now in the new South Africa. So I acknowledge Sophie that is sitting here in front, because Sophie has come to South Africa and she moved with me in the township. Correct, Sophie? And it's an important aspect, Because to change mindsets doesn't happen overnight. You must actively program things. You must actively have a program to bring people together and make people uncomfortable. And that is so important. If you see what we call it now, the breathing space for all, I needed to shed myself. I needed to say, get over yourself, Marlene. No? You have polio. You can't change it. You are in post-polio mode. You are a person of color. Apartheid has happened. Now, how are you going to move forward? So, not everybody like that. Not my own comrades. I'm an activist. So how do I bring in this particular space where the government don't give us money to really make arts, only for a building? You can sit in the corner and say, oh my God, I feel so sorry for myself. This has happened to me, blah, 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 blah. Or you can say, how are you going to sweat this building to make it work? So you become Robin Hood. You get producers like you and you charge them for the opera house. And then you take from that money and you do transformational work, like schools, programs, because it's important. The first time my mother came into that building, she stand in the corner because she never was allowed. So if you were never allowed in a space, would you go to the space? No. I was lucky to grow up in a space where I've been introduced to culture, to music from a very young age, because music was our survival. Singing was our survival. But when I was appointed, people will ask me, what is your qualifications? Hello? Yeah? So these are the kind of things that you are confronted when you're just different. And you're not different. So the premises that we move from is basically to look at the journey from Nico Milan Theatre to where we are now. You can't wipe up history, but you can start on a journey. And that journey has been started. As you can see, Adam Small was one of our best writers in the apartheid era. He couldn't attend his own premiere in this particular theatre. Can you believe it? Yeah? He couldn't attend. Kola to sing, he couldn't do that. The journey to Artscape, you start with schools. When you're my age, I can't change you overnight, man. It's lip services. No? You will say, oh, I believe in humankind. Hello. Your DNA, you've been programmed to be sometimes a racist. No? You just need to be nice. But when you go home, you're going to be the same person stereotyping people. So how are you going to change that? What is the relevancy of that theatre? You bring in school kids. How do you bring that school kids in? Is you have your set works. You work with the education department, so I need to sleep with so many people. That's why my other leg is also giving in. Yeah? It's giving in. Because I must run to the education department because I don't have money. Yeah? So that I can get those kids in order for critical mindsets. So as theatre makers, it's about relevancy. What is happening now? To get those kids in, to be able to read books, to be able to mix, to be able to get the rich kids, the township, whatever, Muslim, Christian, Jewish together, you stage productions that they all must come and see. In that way, you have a mixed audience. You all have a problem with mixed audience, ne? You all have that problem. You must program correctly. So, as you can see there, I will just be very quickly. The values, I'm not going to talk about. Transformation plan, I'm not going to, that's for my board. Goal transformation, I'm not going to talk about that. Exclusive model of empowerment. Very important is that if you don't tell the stories of the people, because our people never mattered, okay? So in order for people to come and be in a space to come to know of each other and to tell each other stories, and that we're not going to have genocide, you need to tell the story of that particular community on stage. It's extremely important. It's the humanity. It's to be able to breathe. I want to tell you a joke. And it's not a joke. It's actually just to make you laugh also, because in our jobs, you need to be able to laugh because you live on the edge all the time. No? We have the final dress rehearsals, and I decided that we need to have the elderly coming to the theatre. Because people at a certain age never had access to that building. So the elderly homes, there is the white, the black, and the colored. We still talk in those terms. This is our realities. I give them all free of charge tickets to the ballet. They're all dressed up. I get money. I also sleep with the bus company. We don't have local transport. It's not so effective. We die all the time on the trains, like my friend here, Renata. Killings is happening all the time. Yeah? So I sleep with the buses as well, to bring in the elderly. So, can you imagine? The white take over the space. They stand there, it's their space. The colored stand there in the corner. The black stands in the corner. I mix the tickets so that they can mix. The white lady comes to me and she says, I don't want to sit next to them. I said, hello, you're sitting next to them. Who are them? I decided, okay, Marlene, you must zen yourself. Be focused. Be focused. Don't think about this is racist. She's 80 years old. I need her children to change. Okay? I said, okay, during interval, I am going to seat you differently, but just for me now. And then she asked, who's Marlene Roux? I said, I will call Marlene Roux later because my name is colonized. Slave history, land been taken from my people, so you usually take the surname of the owner. Roux is French, I can't speak a word of French. Okay? So when they come to the theatre looking for Marlene Roux, poor Charmaine who's here with me, sometimes they just can't register it's me. So I just play along. Get over yourself. That's the issue. The work needs to get done. So what happens is that when they came out, I asked the ballet mistress that she can just keep a little bit the ballet so that they can talk. No? Interval, I ran there with a little bit slow, but I get there. I asked the lady who looks absolutely beautiful, everybody has hats on, do you want to change your seat? She says no. You know what they've spoken about? The children that never come to see them. The beautiful ballet that they just saw. So if I was not taken aback with our history and say this lady was racist, she would have never met this lady next to her. They've got something in common now. And the lesson that I have learned, you must sometimes get over yourself in order to get the job going. Because she's going to tell her grandchildren and her children that she met this wonderful black lady at Artscape. She still call it the Nico Milan, but it's okay. They can't get it. Okay? So I've developed an inclusive model for empowerment, which we will discuss later on when we look at the future, an exclusive model for empowerment, where we need to look at how do we program specifically. Lastly, I just want to show you the wider applications, the Arts Ability Festival. The Arts Ability Festival in particular is that people with disabilities mustn't be programmed separately. It must be part of every single program. Have a clipboard. I have a clipboard. What percentage goes to the ballet, the orchestra, the hip hop with youth disability? Schools Arts Festival, every single special needs schools is part of the Schools Arts Festival. There is not a separate special needs program. Because if we want to talk about human rights and inclusivity in indigenous arts, it is part of the Schools Arts Festival. It is it's a fine line as human beings that we don't program things differently, because otherwise we're going to see ourselves differently. If you cut yourself now here, what blood? Blue or red? Red. No? Second thing that I want to say, we all must go to the toilet, so we mustn't take ourselves so serious. So we do, so that to keep my job, I will do the Nelson Mandela centenary celebration. You'll see now why. No? So it's important that we celebrate our iconic Nelson Mandela, so I have it in the theatre so that I can have a job. There's our Schools Arts Festival. You see what we have. For 3 weeks, we have children running up and down in that theatre. For the main reason is that we need to have conversation across the colour line, across religion, across all of that, so that we can have dialogue. Because in our schools, we don't have arts as a subject. We have an arts and culture learning area, which is a token curriculum. So I don't see myself as a theatre practitioner. I see myself as an activist, using the theatre and the arts as a tool to social cohesion. Otherwise, we will become irrelevant. As you can see, the Schools Arts Festival, we mix it. So every night, we will have 15 schools from different areas, different languages, so that parents are forced to come and watch another school with a different language and a different indigenous background. Very important, because otherwise the class system is going to kick in. We're nearly done. Artscape Women Humanity Festival. Renata is definitely coming to this festival, and you are coming to this festival. And yeah, our wonderful sponsors that's going to make it happen, David Barley and Urban Mars, you're going to make it happen. Because why did we start the Artscape Women Humanity Arts Festival? The board said, my good Lord, what is next? No? The reason for it is that we had corrective rape. Corrective rape is when you're a lesbian, you are raped and you are killed in our township. So our work is not easy. We've decided to have this Humanity Festival so that we can talk with the programming that we do from the stage. People being uncomfortable, it's things that we need to say. In order, not politicians to do it on behalf of society. The arts should do that, and it's extremely important. We also have done what is important with the Humanity Festival is that we have the march, that we march every single year. And every single year, government feels uncomfortable. And I'm in a government position, so maybe ISPA will employ me when I lose the job now again. But what is important is that we have a program which is Women's Zone, which is at the theatre. It is an NGO which is currently, they're publishing women's writers to tell their stories, and that they're visiting each other's homes. Women make changes. We also have programs with Sweat, also to look at prostitution in our country to be legalized. That is part of our Humanity Festival. Also, lawyers must give their time free of charge because I bully them. I go to them as an activist. And during the month of August, as part of the festival of the Humanity Festival, they must give their time free of charge. And that is how we got the rights for women under cultural rights and laws. And indigenous sometimes, they are evils that we need to address. Because women are oppressed when it comes sometimes to religion, cultural laws, and indigenous practices. And that needs to be to a stop. So what we do, the lawyers line up, and you as a woman get free advice at the theatre. At the theatre. And in that way, because to pay for a lawyer, and you're the third or the fourth wife, because religion requires that. But if that man dies, what you get? 0. So we use the arts so that you can come. So we do have mobile mammograms, because our people are poor, our clinics, to look at breast cancer, HIV testing, and we also have men talks and men dialogues. Because women's empowerment is not just about women, it's to teach men how to be respectful. Because sexism runs through every single nation. It's not just a poor issue. It is a global issue. If we look at our Philharmonic Orchestra, it's a home for everybody, the Jazz Master Concert Series, that's important for us. It's young people that we put on stage. And it's a new thing that was never, but the highlight which I want to end really on is the outreach program. The building can just be a building. And every year, we take the theatre to the people. And we take it to the most remote part of where there is no infrastructure. And the best technicians must, because I'm from the rural areas, the only nepotism that takes place is for people with disabilities, women, rural. I declare my interest. So with the rural is to build that particular theatre with everything. They must work right through the night. And then it's also to demystify. It's not just to be an actress, not just to be a singer or a musician, but to be also job creation, to be a technician, a sound technician, a lighting designer, job creation in the theatre. It is to break down the elitism of theatre making. It should come back how theatre has started to be the voice of the people. And being it in that particular most remote areas, one of the criteria is you should walk to the particular performances. And then we put South Africa with all its diversity, with disability, with everything, for an hour and a half on stage. So you see South Africa with indigenous artists, with the ballet. So if you like the ballet and you stay in a 3-story home, you sometimes come to me and you say, but I'm scared to go to the township. I will tell a lie and say the police will come with you to come to the township. I will sit with the police. I will say, let's just demystify the township for the people. Yeah? In order for our own people to go to the township with the police, they give them a nice time to come and see the ballet. It's free of charge. Again, it's to break down the levels of what is human. And the arts can do that. The International Desmond Tutu Peace Lecture. We do that because Desmond Tutu is part of Artscape, it's part of our country, it's part of the world, and it's about peace. Unfortunately, the president got a lash a little bit from myself about persons with disability because he forgot to mention it in Parliament. So it was in our theatre, so I was the MC, so I could tell him. Luckily, he said next time we hope so. So as you can see, we use the theatre in various New Voices program. New Voices program, I think Kevin, you would love that, and also Renata, where we can work together. And New Voices is all the time there to write new plays for young people in specifically that needs a voice. So it's the hip hop, the opera, everything at the same time, as you can see, calling us home. But I want to come, the heritage is the indigenous part. Veterans on stage, most important is that we give a lot to young people, but there were so many artists that never had a chance to perform on the Nico Milan theatre stage. So I bring them back from their old age so that we can honor them. So that mentorship programs between the elderly and the young can take place. Now, I want to end off because the provocation that spoke was also about how the unknown we are fearful of. And I'm so blessed to be able to say, we need to say when we have blessings, that I'm blessed to grow up poor, to contracted polio because the white doctor didn't want to give the farm worker where I come from the vaccine at that particular time. This is a blessing, otherwise I would have never been asked to sit here to talk about disability. Yeah? And also to be able, because apartheid put us all together, who's black. So we were introduced to all religion. So for us, we're not fearful of other, because we are the other in the books and in the anthropologists. This is the beauty. So you can hire us here now. When you talk about the refugees, immigrants, we can do the facilitation. Hello, you may laugh. Hello. So what I want to say to you is that when Mahar Zain, I think most of you know Mahar Zain, is a Lebanese artist who lives in Sweden at this particular stage. He's Muslim. And one of the things to make the orchestra relevant, they need to score onto his music. And he sang for the first time in the theater. And to 1.2 billion people were streamed this particular concert. Because I needed Mahar Zain to say to our people that this theater is a place for all. Because we have a salah room. If you're Muslim, you know what is a salah room, is to go and dua. Now, to dua is not just for the Muslims anymore. The Jewish come to meditate in the theater. Everybody, the Christian comes to meditate. It's a space now for everybody. I wish you could have experienced when Mahar Zain was there, that there was just mats all over Artscape. Before people went into the theater, they did their dua in the theater space. So the theater space is not just a space for the performing arts. It should be a space for human beings just to be and to breathe and to experience humanity. I thank you.
I love you.
I love it. Yeah, Kutan.
They all love each other.
No, we love
already.
each other.
I think these three people can change the world single-handedly, actually. So I think, it's extraordinary. But I hate my job. I've got 13 minutes and 7 seconds left to try and talk about the future, but also to bring in questions and thoughts about the future, I hope, from all of you. So maybe I'll give you 5 minutes between you, and then we need to bring everybody in here to talk about where we leave this hall now and what we can actually do action. Obviously, you're all doing action all the time, but not everybody in the arts is doing the things you're doing. And you are inspiring the rest of us, but we need to spread the work you're doing, which is so important. So could we have a very quick conversation about hopes and fears and challenges for the future? Really quick, and then we need to get ideas from all of you, even though I can't see you. Who'd like to start there? Maybe,
Can we start with
maybe
hopes?
Hopes.
Yeah.
There's
Start with
enough
hopes.
fear and
Yeah.
Start
challenges
with
for the
hopes,
future
yeah.
in the universe right now. Like, if we could start with hope, then we can...
We can just stick to hopes.
yeah.
Yeah.
You start with hopes.
All right, I'll start with hopes. Well, my hope is that that rather than just putting on shows, rather than just like, here's my thing, I hope people come, that we all work relationally, that we all work in relationship with where we're at. And that means that's more than just like, oh, we have we have an outreach person, or we have an outreach department, but we work in relationship to the land that we're on, in relationship to the people who are living there and who have lived there historically and who live there now currently, but that we have a relationship with the people that we hope are coming to see our works, to engage with our buildings, to engage with our venues, to engage with our artists, and hope that we can work relationally,
Yes.
across borders, across lands. That's a hope.
I think also a hope is that it's to understand nationalism. It's to move forward, and that is where theatre gives us that particular space. It's easier for us to work together. And for an example, I would like to say is that it's also entertainment that you need to look at, and it's also the relevancy that you need to look at. So we are in a space to understand to how do we bring together, because that's a subject that we try to tread not onto. There's the cultural aspect. What is culture? Also habits that's been formed over so many years, and it's things that that we're busy engaging with. Then there's the performing arts aspect, very specific, which is a job for people, which is a science, which is a job. How do we deal with that in particular? The hope that we have is the resources, and it's how we use that resources for the benefit of everybody. So I would like to say, for hope, is that you are the hope. If you're going to look at the hope for other people, in other people, then you're not going to drive what is now and forward. Because you first need to look at what resource do I have in order to make that changes. And if you can't see that, then you mustn't be in the job that you are.
Renata, hopes?
Eu acho que nós nos preocupamos muito na questão de mudar o outro. É sempre o outro que precisa mudar.
I think we are extremely focused in changing the other. It's always the other who needs change.
E na verdade a mudança começa dentro de nós.
But truly, change starts within ourselves.
Finish.
Yes, thanks.
Finished.
Okay, within ourselves, within all of you.
Yeah,
So maybe
I
if we can-
prefer.
Yeah.
If we can have the house lights up, perhaps, and I can't even see where the microphones are, but I gather they're to either side. Okay, so questions, thoughts, actions. Everybody's so completely bowled over by the panelists, they've all gone silent.
Hello.
Thank you. If you could identify yourselves, please.
Yes, hi, I'm Barbara Scales. I'm an American who took refuge in Canada 50 years ago.
Oh, gee.
I just want to say that I'm struck by I've worked I'm an artist manager, and I work with many people who have had very wonderful lives, who are deeply motivated by their love for the work that they do. I've also worked with people who are the children or grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. They are themselves, or artists who are themselves refugees or children of refugees. People who are children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren of people who have lived in slavery. And there's a kind of a trauma that we need to recognize as we engage with them. And it's not the same kind of engagement. I say that as an artist manager. I know that the people who have lived with a trauma, who have lived with the self-discovery that comes from trauma that you have talked about, it's a very different kind of thing. And it's about hope, it's about engagement, it's about a generosity of spirit that that we can't forget as we live with them in our world of the arts and in our societies and our neighborhoods and our communities. And I wondered, however, it's very specific in the arts because sometimes it comes with its challenges. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that experience. Thank you very much for this wonderful panel.
Yes, I think very crucial and very short is that, as I said, as I sleep with so many people with funders, I sleep also with so many NGOs. The theatre is 24 hours open. NGOs are based at Artscape. One of the NGOs that we're working with, which I work with, is Chrysalis. It's youth at risk, which lose sometimes everything. They come from gangs, backgrounds, and just before they go to jail, we take them on and they're part of the theatre. But what is most important is that they're part of the jazz art theatre, how to use your body as a tool, as healing. And how do you deal with anger? And how do you deal? Trauma is not just because I can say I'm still traumatized, what I've gone through in my lifetime, because you park it, it comes out. But extremely important with young people, and how do we heal? It's not just young people, it is also the older folks. You know about District 6, how people have been removed when it was declared apartheid. Their houses were demolished. So we have different NGOs just to sit, have a cup of tea, and just to talk. We feel that sometimes not even talking, just to sit and to breathe. Because it's sometimes other people's agenda that wants you to talk, and sometimes you're not ready to talk. And that is why we use sometimes, I'm not saying it is the right, I've listened to we yesterday, we're going to work together, I'm here to network, to see how it can work, but not one model fits for one particular circumstances. In the arts, we work with our body, and in the arts, we work with stories. And that is why those NGOs are important for us in South Africa to look at that. Not necessarily that you become an actor or a dancer, but use the arts as a tool to access into how you need to go forward. We don't look and try to be psychologists. We can't do that. But it's how do you deal with your anger, with your body, and how you're going to transmit that.
Should we have, yeah, thank you. Could you say who you are?
Yeah, hi, I'm Christelle Holiday from Quebec, Canada, and my question is much more specific and it's directly targeted at Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin.
As you know, in the Quebec world, in the past theatre world, in the past year, there's been two huge major kind of controversies surrounding the theatre director Robert Lepage, and Renata was obviously one of them. It's caused, I live 2 hours away from the metropole, and it's caused huge division, huge disruption. What, as an arts community maybe, but also in terms of the indigenous arts community, have we learned from the whole Kanata controversy? And in a situation where there is still huge controversy, and I have conversations with people in my town, and it's so split, it's trying to find common ground is very hard. What's the way forward? Thinking about hope, what can we do to take that forward?
Oh. Yeah, that one.
Is that something everybody knows about who isn't Canadian?
So,
And I'm just wondering, we haven't quite got time to explain the background.
well, I could maybe try to 30-second it. Okay, so there are two works that you're talking about. You're talking about Slave and Kanata, and both of those have brought up issues of cultural appropriation within the theater. Slave involved a play that involved slave songs that were performed by a mixed cast of Black and non-Black artists. And Kanata involved a story of Canadian colonization from the fur trade through the residential schools to the downtown east side in Vancouver that didn't involve any Indigenous artists in any way. Like they didn't have any presentation of Indigenous bodies, Indigenous artists at all in the production. And so both of those events caused huge backlash. I think what we've learned is we are living in an era where we cannot tolerate that kind of exclusion. Mm-hmm. That I think that it's to do a play like Kanata, I think from my perspective, this is my opinion, to do a play like Kanata on Turtle Island, on Indigenous lands, and not involve Indigenous performers in the telling of that, or especially in a project that works in a co-creation model, where a collective creation model, was deeply hurtful and painful to the Indigenous community, to be excluded once again in the telling of our own story. And to be excluded in such a public way is humiliating. And I have to tell you, it was, I responded to this controversy. I knew about Kanata earlier in the year, or last November, but I didn't respond until things sort of happened, and I was getting floods of emails from folks all across the country raging, and so I needed to, as a cultural, I guess, leader in this field, I had to respond in some kind. And so I did, but I really didn't want to have to. I didn't really want to, the last thing I wanted to have to do in a year where I'm trying to build the first Indigenous National Theatre department in Canada was to have to respond to somebody who I've admired my entire career in this way. And so what we've learned is that we are as a culture, have moved beyond that kind of fetishizing or, yeah. I think the response spoke for itself. I think the heatedness of that response and the absolute sort of rejection from the Indigenous community of this work, I think has taught us a lot.
Okay, thank you. I think
He
thank
was
you,
first.
Okay, and I think this is it. We haven't got any more time after you two, so let's, thank you.
Hi guys, my name's Dan Graham. I'm from Sydney, Australia. I'm actually a theatre director as well as a disability advocate who happens to have a disability. And it follows on what you say and used to know. I just was wondering what your view is in terms of ownership. Basically, I'm finding very difficult that basically I define myself as a director first and foremost, who so happens to have a disability. But when it's what I would classify the main stage, for a better word, it's almost seen as a foreign concept, basically. How can that be possible? Like, obviously, my disability informs the workload I do. I have told disability stories. I'm working on a production at the moment on Shakespeare and disability. But I don't want to necessarily be, inverted commas, the disability director, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I just wonder how I can, being a youngish young director, how I can actually be in that sphere, but at the same time when I see people who, back to what the last lady was saying, people without disabilities telling my stories, you know, so I'd like to get people's points of view. Yeah.
Maybe could we have both questions at once, and then we can...
I don't have a question, only a comment.
Go on then, make your comment.
My name is Orly Bagel, and I'm a geographical mistake. I had to get born in Israel, and I was born in Mexico, so I'm half and half. And I'm a presenter, a cultural presenter, and I am a child of a Holocaust survivor of a concentration camp, of what Barbara was speaking. And I just wanted to say that the urgency of now is to keep the memory. Yes. That has to do as well in relation of the panel of yesterday of the storytelling. Yes. Not only the storytelling of today, but the storytelling of the past. Yes. Not to forget and to learn from it. And I'm trying through art to keep my demons a little bit quiet. They are not always quiet. But and through art really to bring memory alive.
Yes,
thank you.
Which connects to what Marlene was saying about trauma and memory of the whole thing. Absolutely. Have you got a response for the...
Yeah, I think most important is that with a young democracy, we can't forget. And the stories need to be told to the generation of now as well, in order that we never ever go through that, because we can go back very easily, because we've learned what has happened. The second aspect about disability, it's about programming. It is about, it happens to be I'm disabled and I'm very proud and I want to make it in that particular aspect. I am a facilitator. I don't believe in titles, so I call myself a facilitator. These names just makes you isolated and you don't do your job. But what is important is equity and equality. This thing that I wear costs me 60,000 rand. For Sophie to hear, this costs her 80,000 rand. For persons with disability to be equal, we need to have equity. We need to have a job. We need to be programmed as mainstream. So it's not just, and you need to be able, and that is why it is so important at ISPA that we have this particular conversation, not about differences, about inclusion and hope. So that when you program with that I am disabled. What do I need to be able to be equal as an actress on that particular stage? Is to be able to say, that's a leg, work. What does she need? So your budgeting needs to look different. So it's the tools about equity and equality. It is the same when we talk about when Renata is an actress. That is what, but we can't say, we can't forget our history. So it's important for the young director that is there, if he's a fellow of ISPA, is for ISPA to know, I need this in order for equity and equality to happen. And on that, I won't be quiet, because that is when we talk about inclusion with action and hope. And that is important.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I might take...
Eu vi o vídeo de uma atriz que ela tinha paralisia cerebral.
I've seen a video with an actress who had palsy.
Ela é de stand-up.
A stand-up actress.
E ela tinha um grupo de teatro e sempre que ela estava em cena, as pessoas se emocionavam com ela.
She was in a theater troupe or group, and whenever she went on stage, people tended to be very moved.
Mas as pessoas nunca chamavam ela para atuar numa peça.
But people never called her, invited her to be on stage in a play.
Um dia caiu no grupo uma peça com uma atriz que tem paralisia, com o personagem que tem paralisia cerebral.
So one day a new play came along with a disabled character, a character with palsy.
E não colocaram ela.
And she wasn't invited to play it.
E aí hoje ela faz um sucesso fazendo stand-up.
And now she's very successful as a stand-up comedian actress.
E aí ela fala o seguinte.
And this is what she says.
Se eu não posso interpretar Beyoncé, a Beyoncé também não pode me interpretar.
If I cannot play the role of Beyoncé, Beyoncé cannot play my role.
There we go.
I think
Easy.
I'm supposed to stop this now to
I
tell
want
you
to sing.
there will be a 25-minute coffee break sponsored by our back Pollard Friedlander. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to take moderator's privilege and just read you the shortest quote ever that keeps me going when I think we're not achieving anything. And this is about from a Scottish writer called A.L. Kennedy, who writes about the power of the arts. And I think it's the most beautiful passage that always keeps me going when I feel down, which is what she says is, I believe in what we might call the unnecessary beauty of art. As an artist, I would say that, but then again, individuals and groups who have sought to control or extinguish populations, to marginalize or demonize this or that type of human being, they seem to believe in the power of the arts even more than I do. They ardently seek out to restrict those intimate, idiosyncratic joys we find in the songs we sing, the stories that travel with us, the verses that sustain us, the paintings and drawings and sculptures, windows and buildings, voices and performances, images that lift us and give us dignity, the things that show us the light in our world and in ourselves, the things that show us individual human beings have the power to create wonders which outlast them and which transcend every classification of gender, race, religion, nationality and age. So if they believe in the power of the arts, we should all do so. Thank you very much, and that's the end of the panel. Thank you very much.